The years between 1368 and 1398 are an excellent period because it marks the birth of the Ming Dynasty, the rise of Timur, the decline of Mongol power, the consolidation of Moscow, and the transition from the medieval world toward the early Renaissance. Let's start from Episode 1, the fall of the Mongol Empire in China, and a new Chinese dynasty rises while the Mongol Empire begins to fragment. In 1368, one of history's greatest political transformations took place. After nearly a century of Mongol rule, the Yuan dynasty collapsed as Zhu Yuanzhang, a former peasant and Buddhist monk, captured Beijing and proclaimed the founding of the Ming Dynasty. Ascending the throne as the Hongwu Emperor, Zhu sought not merely to replace one dynasty with another, but to rebuild China itself. Years of war and famine had devastated the countryside. Land reforms, agricultural recovery, and a restoration of traditional Confucian government became the pillars of his new empire. The defeated Mongol court fled north into the grasslands of Mongolia. Although the Mongols remained powerful beyond the Great Wall, their dream of ruling all of China had come to an end. Meanwhile, Europe was slowly emerging from the catastrophic Black Death. Towns once emptied by plague were beginning to fill again. Trade revived and kingdoms started rebuilding their economies. Across the Atlantic, unknown to Eurasia, the Aztec civilization continued to expand around Lake Texcoco, laying the foundations for one of the greatest cities in the Americas. The medieval world was changing. One empire had fallen, another had risen, and the balance of power across Eurasia had begun to shift. Episode 2. China rebuilds while Europe and Russia grow stronger. As the Ming dynasty stabilized, Hongwu introduced sweeping reforms. Corrupt officials were punished, farmland was redistributed, and millions of peasants returned to cultivation. China's economy slowly recovered after decades of warfare. Further west, the Principality of Moscow continued its gradual rise. Though still paying tribute to the Mongols, its princes steadily expanded their authority over neighbouring Russian lands. Western Europe remained locked in the 100 Years' War between England and France. Although neither side gained a decisive advantage during these years, the conflict transformed medieval warfare and strengthened royal governments. Japan remained divided between rival imperial courts. Powerful samurai families increasingly overshadowed the emperor, foreshadowing centuries of military rule. Across the Indian Ocean, Chinese junks, Arab dhows, and Southeast Asian merchants connected civilizations through expanding maritime trade. Silk, porcelain, spices, and precious metals flowed across thousands of miles of sea routes, enriching kingdoms from China to East Africa. Episode 3. A new conqueror emerges from Central Asia. While China rebuilt and Europe slowly recovered, a new conqueror appeared in Central Asia. Timur, later known in Europe as Tamerlane, united Turkic and Mongol tribes into a formidable military machine. Claiming the legacy of Genghis Khan, he began conquering neighbouring kingdoms with extraordinary speed. In 1380, another historic event unfolded in Russia. Prince Dmitry Donskoy defeated Mongol forces at the Battle of Kulikovo. Although Mongol domination did not end immediately, the victory became a powerful symbol of Russian unity and independence. Meanwhile, the Ming Dynasty strengthened its northern frontier by expanding military colonies and repairing defensive fortifications that would later evolve into the famous Great Wall of the Ming era. Far away in Italy, artists, architects, and scholars began rediscovering classical learning. These early intellectual movements would eventually blossom into the Renaissance, transforming European culture. Episode 4: Empires Expand. By the late 1380s, Timur had become the most feared conqueror in Asia. Persia, Afghanistan, and much of Central Asia fell under his rule as city after city surrendered or was destroyed. In southeastern Europe, the Ottoman Empire steadily expanded across the Balkans, challenging Christian kingdoms and reshaping regional politics. To China's northeast, another important transformation occurred. In 1392, General Yi Seonggae established the Joseon dynasty, replacing the declining Goryeo kingdom. Joseon quickly built close diplomatic ties with Ming China, creating one of East Asia's most enduring political relationships. The political map of Eurasia. Episode 5. The medieval world prepares for an age of exploration and empire. By the end of the 14th century, the world had entered a new era. China stood once again as one of the world's strongest empires under the Ming Dynasty. Nanjing had become a thriving imperial capital, supported by agricultural prosperity and efficient administration. Far to the west, Timur launched one of his most famous campaigns, invading northern India in 1398. His armies captured Delhi, leaving devastation but also extending Timurid influence across Asia. Europe was changing in quieter ways. Universities expanded, classical knowledge spread, and the first sparks of the Renaissance illuminated Italy. These intellectual changes would eventually reshape science, politics, and art. Russia continued consolidating around Moscow, laying the foundation for a future empire. Meanwhile, caravans crossed the Silk Road, merchant ships sailed the Indian Ocean, and civilizations remained connected through trade long before the Age of Discovery. The years between 1368 and 1398 marked far more than the rise and fall of kingdoms. They witnessed the rebirth of China